Welcome back to the channel. Yet again, another Hacker Hangouts and another time where my stream deck is not responding. There we go. Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts. Thank you for joining us on another Saturday morning. And we're jumping into right to repair. And it's such an interesting topic. And I got lost in actually a bunch of videos specifically by Louis Rossmann and watching him talk about right to repair. And I had so many questions. I reached out to Gator and Gowrie and Gulo, who knows so much more about repair than I do. So I felt it was like something to talk about. Is Louis right? Does he know what he's talking about? I mean, he's dedicated most of his life toward, or is it the politicians who are the experts in technology and really should be laying the groundwork to whether or not we own our own stuff? Because that's what right to repair feels like it comes down to, is do you own your own stuff? Does manufacturers have the right to restrict the sale of chips which are used within genuine repair? Like, you guys know the topic better than I do. I want to go check chat and see how it's working, but can one of you just give maybe a definition? What is right to repair for someone like me who doesn't know like a ton about it?
The ability for you to go... Oh, go ahead.
Oh. No, it's fine.
Gator,
so I was going to say...
Right, so the right to repair is whether or not you can disassemble Johnny 5. It's companies saying that they have copyrights or patents on anything it is that they built, sold, designed, and the right to repair movement is saying, hey, I want to be able to disassemble Johnny 5 and reassemble Johnny 5 when he breaks down, rather than having to go and pay the company to have their devices fixed for them. They want to be able to repair the things that they've already paid for and be able to move on with their lives.
Is there anything missed in that definition, Gator or Gowrie, before you jump in? Because I have so many questions.
No, I don't think it's just the right to disassemble Johnny 5, right? There's a nuance to this. It's in order to have the right to do that, you have to force manufacturers of these boards, of these components, of these phones, of these computers, etc., to do two things. And one is to publish their hardware schematics, and two is to sell chips on the open market so that you can replace the chips on those board or the components on the board, because they might use, special, specially made components for their stuff, depending on what you're repairing. And so it's those two things as well. One, having a design on your phone that allows you to take it apart instead of having everything glued in and glued together like Apple does. And two, publishing schematics and selling the components that are described on that schematics.
And something I didn't realize at first, but kind of came to me. I always thought like right to repair always had to do with like phones and electronics and like consumer electronics, and then like he brought up a point where it's like, no, it's like tractors and stuff like that. So am I correct? This expands to everything, not just consumer electronics, but like cars and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So I mean, John Deere has had major issues to where they've been fighting our farmers in the Midwest and anybody else who's farming, to where, hey, you got to pay our technician to come out, you got to pay for our OEM parts, no third party, or you lose your warranty and all this other jazz. It's pretty crazy. When it comes to the right repair, I've been a proponent of it for a long time. Both EFF go through and have lots of different posts on that, but then so do the iFixit. And over the years, they've had multiple iFixit manifestos to where they basically break down the different parts that are included with the right to fix our own stuff. So we can go through and repair. And it's actually better than going in having to like recycle parts, because if you can get replacement parts and get your device back up and running, you don't just have to go buy a new one. And then whether you're donating, hopefully you're recycling your old electronics. So repairing it can also save you money because you're not buying a brand new device. Repair teaches engineering as well. I mean, so instead of it just...
I'm going to pull it back a little bit, because you're getting into like the benefits of it. And I do want to get into like, because it seems like it fixes like some e-waste, in which that almost seems like it really goes in, like, we'll say in the core principles of Apple and things like that, which they're always bragging about, like, reducing e-waste and being green, and all of those things feel like they would lend itself to like repairing old devices. But you said something about John Deere, which was interesting, because when I started looking into the John Deere stuff, it's weird, because when you get a repair done, like if you don't use the proper parts, their operating system is sophisticated enough to like just shut down the tractor. Like that's insane, right?
Oh, it's so much worse, right? Like, and I'm not going to hammer on John Deere specifically, but obviously they're very well known for having very anti-consumer practices in that regard. But there was a battery repair stream I was watching where you need, like, there's two parts to a battery that you really care about. There's the actual battery cells, and then there's the thing that controls how you charge those battery cells and how that battery discharges, right? And that there's a small microchip on there that handles that. And battery manufacturers can prevent you from replacing the broken or spent cells by making it so that that piece of hardware, if it detects a charge dropping below a certain point, it clears its ROM, or it clears its programmable thing. So it basically just bricks the device if you attempt to repair it. And that's not only anti-consumer, that's just like pro e-waste, right? Mm-hmm. And in a lot of cases, we're finding more and more spots throughout the industry where hardware has been designed in this way, where it is not just anti-consumer, but it is literally designed to force you through a repair process where they can extract as much money out of you as possible and potentially use the most wasteful way to replace it. Because what happens is, instead of sending a battery component back to the manufacturer to have it repaired and replaced, the consumer's just going to buy a new one, right? And that's horrendous. That's horrendous. And we all know how bad battery production is for the environment. So any production facility that is encouraging that behavior is, in my opinion, just unethical.
Look, this covers a few things. Really quick, before Gulo jumps in, there's a few things that we mentioned which I want to make sure we highlight at one point. Because schematics are one of those things which said it's going to force manufacturers to release schematics. The other one is like batteries, and I feel like there's some trepidation like on my end going like batteries just seem like you hear about battery explosions and stuff like that. So I want to like come back to those two topics, Gulo, to give everyone just time to think on those.
We can actually go back a little bit farther from even the John Deere stuff, erasing ROMs, and look at printers. How many, like HP printers, or, well, pretty much any printers, they force you to buy OEM parts. They put chips in their toner cartridges and their ink cartridges that force you to purchase new rather than doing refills, rather than purchasing third party, trying to save any type of money. Their goal is to force you into their ecosystem to where you have to use their parts because they've engineered it to a way that you can't use other people's parts.
But like, okay, you bring up a point though, which is they've manufactured it so you have to use their parts. Couldn't this be argued like that's a safety thing? Like, okay, in printers, sure, like worst case scenario, you use bad ink. It clogs up your ports, and then all of a sudden that company's on the hook to like satiate a warranty that they didn't want to. Or like you use a battery inside a device, you repair it yourself, and then it ends up bricking another piece of the board, which now falls under warranty. Like, is this a way for companies to like protect themselves from like
or
the
worse,
warranty?
Like so batteries are probably the most critical safety issue here, right? Where if you don't balance, like if you don't check your cells and you don't balance the cells before you tack them in and install them, you can have a serious fire hazard because one of the cells might overcharge or undercharge, and you have an unbalanced load across your battery pack, and that can become a fire hazard, right? And we've all seen what lithium fires look like when you pop one of those batteries, and when you have those large cells, it becomes even more dangerous. And so I think manufacturers to some extent can say, specifically with batteries, they would be hesitant to allow the average consumer to replace those things. I'll grant them that there might be some claim to that, but people do third-party work on their cars all the time. And those things use gasoline, right? So like we drive these giant gasoline, like those things can explode. We drive those around every day. So I don't buy the safety argument at all.
Gator brought up a comment, and then I want to come back to the safety one, which was from Brandon, which was hardware to sell consumables is different from RTR. Gator, you said you found that interesting. What interests you about that comment?
So going through and saying if you're trying to go and just get replacement parts versus having the ability to actually repair it. So if Apple were to sell their official screen versus like going to iFixit and getting the third party, and the ability to, when we're talking about specifically batteries, some people glue in their batteries to where you're literally bending these things to try to pull them out of the device versus there being a pull tab to where it's double-sided sticky tape, and much like the commander strips that you have that you can pull on to be able to undo the stickiness and then be able to pull out the battery easily without the threat of bending, stabbing, or exploding, right? So I think there is a difference between having access to the hardware versus having the ability and the right to go through and repair.
So let me ask again, just trying to learn with so much of this is, you have Apple devices. Like, again, I have Apple. I don't know why. I think there's a lot of hate on Apple. But my phone it's so much thinner than it used to be. Like, they used to be huge. You'd open it up. You'd replace your screen pretty easily. You'd replace a battery. I did it in an iPhone before. But the new ones have gotten more and more and more compressed, more and more compact. Like, let's even use, like, the M1 chip and things like that. Like, you don't have memory you can easily swap out. Everything becomes on one chip. So does part of right to repair enforce the manufacturers to have, like, we'll say, clunkier devices where they're more open, they have pull tabs and things like that? Or is it simply like, it doesn't matter how difficult, it doesn't matter if there's like 7 solder points underneath a chip. Like, they need to make the schematics available, but they don't necessarily have to make it easy. Is that kind of like a correct way of asking that?
I mean, like, I don't think we're ever going to have a world in which something forces manufacturers to make their boards repairably easy or easily repairable, right? And what's going to drive that is if we force those manufacturers to publish schematics and make components available so that third-party repair companies can do the repairs, it will drive that requirement naturally. And the situation we're in right now, just to really drive this home, the situation we're in right now is these repairs can happen. Apple, Samsung, all of these companies, they do these repairs. You can send your phone in for repair. They have shops that they will do them. They're super backed up. And, because it's one company trying to service the entire world, they have the ability to do this. And they want to extract as much money out of the consumer as they possibly can for that service, and they want to prevent competition in that area. So it's not so much should they be forced to make their stuff repairable. Their stuff is repairable. Some of them are easier than others. Their stuff is repairable, but they want you to believe it is not.
Right.
Right? That's what they really, really want. And that's like, go ahead.
How much of this is planned obsolescence?
That's what I
So how much of this is like the whole light bulb conspiracy of, if I make a device that lasts forever, then I can't sell any more devices and I start to lose money after I've saturated the market. If I allow my consumers to fix their own devices so that they can last longer or last forever, then I'm not selling as many devices. How much of this is actually planned obsolescence so that they can continue to make the same profits that they're making?
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, with things getting thinner and being able to say, hey, are we going to start losing out on things if we need to be able to start asking for folks to make things easily more repairable? That's where, honestly, I go to the point where, I've got my iFixit kits. I pull things apart and try to fix it for other people all the time. But I'm now specifically choosing things that have the right to repair as part of the bonus, right? So like the framework laptop, to where I can completely replace everything that's inside of it, and it's going to be completely modular, which is great. I liked those ideas with different phones in the past. They came along and then the phones kind of dropped, like the Google Aura project. I was super excited for that. Looking at other projects that are not just open source hardware or software, but making sure you can replace the parts. So then I'm not just going and grabbing a new device. So I'm personally voting with my wallet and trying to encourage the folks that are going through and building devices this way now.
I mean, it was
as for whether or not devices become more clunky, that is, they've been clunky in the past. And the move to go smaller and smaller, yes, they started taking shortcuts. They're going to continue to make shortcuts. But engineering, how do you design something so that you can shrink it down? You have constraints. And if you ignore an entire set of constraints, such as right to repair, then you're going to super glue and duct tape everything together to cut as many corners as you can. Yes, a device that needs to be repaired is going to be something that's going to be clunkier to begin with, but as time goes on, the engineering, the skills, and the knowledge is going to increase so that you can design better, smaller devices.
And that's where I think I'm okay. Like I think at least this is like one of the things I got from Louis Rossman's channel, which I really liked, where he was saying, yeah, the manufacturers should be making them smaller. The MacBook Airs, like original laptops. I remember like, what was it, like my Sagar laptop? It's like one of my first laptops I got.
The Sagars, dude. My first laptop too.
Oh, it was freaking huge. It was like a 2.5 inch at the back. It was like a 16.1 inch screen. I got it in high school. It was like $1,800. I had to save up so much. It was like a 3 gigahertz processor with a gig of RAM, which is like freaking amazing. And then I proceeded to play like Red Alert on it. But either way, I got Doom running on it. That's the important piece. But it was super easy to repair. I don't want one of those laptops. And this is like one of the things he said on his channel is he's not like discouraging. Like no one wants a clunky device. I mean, maybe some people want a clunky device. But he's saying like it's not on them to necessarily make it easy to repair. It can go smaller. They can glue it together. I don't think they're purposely trying, like, and this is where I think it gets harder because they could purposely make it harder to repair, but at least make it so that the parts are available. He brought up the point of monitors. Originally, on the old like MacBooks and old laptops, for the display processor effectively, or the display module, it was like this big, huge, long chip. And then it's become one chip and then a smaller chip. And now in like the M1, it's like an embedded chip, where it might even be something he can replace, but that's okay. It's on the repairers to figure that out and have the schematic available. And that's probably where I'm going to pull it back is schematics. Like this is one of those arguments I've seen brought up in Congress numerous times, which is, well, the schematics are intellectual property. If you release the schematic, anyone can manufacture the device. Anyone can now reverse engineer. They don't even have to reverse engineer it. They can just look at the schematic and then rebuild the board. Is that argument a proper argument, or is that coming from just like naiveness from them?
So I come from, I'm old. I'm super old. I come from an age where there were electronics stores. I could go and drop off my TV at an electronics repair shop and they would pull out the manual, which actually had the schematics in it, disassemble the TV and fix it. I learned how to fix CRT monitors. I learned how to fix TVs and VCRs. That was one of my things growing up was, hey, I've got this really thick book that came with it, and in the back of it is the schematics of how it's assembled, what parts it needs, and then I can go replace whatever parts and pieces that I need to replace on them to actually repair them. This isn't a new thing. This was something that we'd already been doing for decades, and there was an entire industry around it. And I don't seem to remember there being a problem with that industry. I seem to remember dropping off my VCR or TV or whatever, or fixing my neighbor's stuff. I had neighbors around the neighborhood that would pay me as a freaking 8-year-old to take apart their TV and replace some capacitors in it.
Back in the day when you were that old, one, I want to see someone just drop off like a 60-inch like big screen TV. Like you could barely move those things. That thing dies. It's just in the basement. It's off in the corner. But like, it's like early in the day, like sure, they were all pretty much the same. Like most TVs, most CRTs, most VCRs, they worked fundamentally the same. There wasn't like we'll say like advanced intellectual property in them. What about with devices now, like an iPhone, a full schematic? Is that considered intellectual property?
I disagree.
I will. What I will say is no, absolutely not. Schematics are not intellectual property. Not even slightly. Like, yes, there's maybe copyright. Maybe they have the right to sell, to sell the schematics. But I think they must be forced to make those schematics available in the same way that, like, I should be able to ask Ford, hey, the fuse box here has a wire running to it that has clearly been cut because some portion of my car no longer works. I need to be able to ask, where does this wire go so I can fix it, right? Mm-hmm. That's exactly what a chip is. It's just a bunch of embedded wires. Yeah, someone could take the schematic and reproduce the actual thing, but they would have to spend an extraordinary amount of time setting up an entire fab facility just to be able to say, like, oh, this is a knockoff iPhone. And then there would be all kinds of trademark issues there. So, like, there's already intellectual property defenses there that prevent people from doing exactly that, even if they had the schematics. And even if they had access to every single component and it was made available, yeah, you could run off and go make your own iPhone, but it's not going to happen because none of the big manufacturers that you could actually get to print those chips are going to do it for you. Well, and just to be clear, the Chinese manufacturers that are going to build these knockoffs are going to do it anyway because they're going to get their hands on these schematics and they're going to do it anyway. So it's not a real argument.
Well, the other piece of this is like the software, the source code. Like, this is like the weird confusion that I've seen in Congress all the time is like that source code equals schematics. And obviously, I think us and anyone watching this channel knows that's not true. The source code, the software running on the chips, on the boards, isn't available. The thing I find interesting with the schematics is, like, I've seen Bunny do a reverse engineering channel or challenge at DEF CON, who runs hardware hacking, or did for a very long time. And it's one of those things is for me who has no idea what I'm doing, and I ran it. I went and tried his reverse engineering challenge. Like, that was me, following traces and following the different chips and Googling different chips. But like for him or like anyone else in that field, it seems like reverse engineering a schematic, it just takes time. Like, you have to have the skill to do it and look up chips, but you can rebuild a schematic pretty easily. But that's a skill set which is unique to those individuals. Yet for someone like, we'll say a car mechanic, he's not gonna he needs the schematic to to go and know how to attach that wire back up. It's not going to be, okay, now I have to reverse engineer this entire car and this entire car and this entire car and build my own schematics up. Like, so I guess I think that's kind of the question is, like, how easy am I wrong on this? Is it easy to rebuild a schematic?
So I think I can say this, and if I get sued, I get
answer
sued.
The question is it easy to rebuild a schematic? Like, that's the one I'm really curious about.
It's a skill set. It depends on what it is that you're taking apart. If I'm taking apart a combustion engine and reverse engineering a combustion engine, I have the basic understandings of how they work. If I'm taking apart a piece electronic device, I have a basic understanding of how it works. It depends on what your skill set is and how complex the device is. To go one step further, I worked at a company that made processors for a while. We used to buy competitor processors, and we had these very special routers that would shave off the chip layer by layer so that we could document how the other processors were built. We would build the schematics of another company's processors to see how they were laying out the processor, how they were laying out each layer of the silicon. And that's a common practice. It's a common practice for companies to go out and purchase competitor hardware and attempt to reverse engineer it to see how things work. Now, there is the whole issue of copyrights and patents and those types of things. And directly copying somebody else's work, no, I never worked at any place that did that. We would take insights from how they did something, and if it wasn't already in a patent or a copyright somewhere, then we may use those insights. We may use them as inspiration, but we would reverse engineer things all the time at pretty much any company I've worked at.
How much time did it take reverse engineer a board, because like this is one of the things is Brandon actually threw out there is like reverse engineering an 8-layer board is orders of magnitude more than a 2. But I guess like this is probably the time to pull this back to the question is we're not talking about replacing motherboards, and we're not talking about necessarily like okay, hey, there's a problem on the third layer down. One, I don't even know how this would happen, but like, oh, there's a burned trace halfway through the board. The whole board does need to be replaced. No one's rebuilding at that point. But having that part available to repair, something which was so interesting with like iPhones and whatnot, even if like you're like an authorized repairer, you don't get access to every chip. You only get access to like the screen. The speed. Actually, it's funny. I think in one of his videos, Rossman's videos, he was talking about, or hold on, yes, Rossman. I've seen him. You don't like recognize the name in your head, but like when he was talking about like even authorized repair shop doesn't have access to like the ports to replace. They only have access to like certain things, and they're forced to actually sell so many devices before they're able to actually start repairing. Like, there's weird complexities there, but the one which intrigues me is that the part of right to repair is that the manufacturers can lock the chip down, like make it so like I've taken apart the phone. This is the chip which is burned out. This is the one I want to replace. And when they go to that chip manufacturer and say, I need a replacement for this and I can fix the board, the manufacturer will be like, nope, Apple is forced our hand where we can't sell that chip to individuals. We can only sell it to Apple. That's the part where is that, look, where's the complexities of that where I'm missing? Like, is there any, does the company get hurt by selling that?
So what I'll say is this, and this is where like IP comes in, right? The boards themselves and the schematics to those boards are no more IP than like a manual to a car that tells you how it's put together and how to take it apart and replace things that third-party repair shops for cars already have. Now, chips, the actual design of, we'll say, the M1 or any of the co-processors on that board, that is absolutely IP in the sense of source code. So for example, you shouldn't be able to go off and make your own M1, right? That is Apple licensed, like that's the level of complexity and quote unquote, if you want to treat it as source code, that's kind of where you cross that line. And the key question here is, should Apple be forced to sell those chips to be replaced on boards by third-party repair shops? Not should Apple be forced to release the schematics or the VHDL or whatever it is they use to make the M1. We're not saying release the source code to the M1 or the schematics to the M1. We're saying, should they be forced to sell them so that third-party repair shops can replace an M1 if that's what happens? And I think unequivocally the answer has to be yes. They have to be forced to do that. Otherwise they're being go ahead.
Wait a minute. So where's the line drawn? If right to repair is me being able to take apart a cell phone and replace chips on it, that requires a specific skill set. What if my skill sets is, hey, I've got a processor, I should be able to fix a bent or broken pin on a processor, but I would need to have the schematics to go through and do that. There's a level of complexity to this, completely yes, but at what point do you say, hey, you shouldn't be able to do this because it's impacting our IP versus, hey, we're doing this because it's so complex and we don't want you to touch it and you should never know about it?
I mean, to me, that level is when you start decapping processors and reverse engineering, like how the actual logic on the processor works, which there's ways to do it. Like that process exists. But like if you're trying to reproduce and manufacture your own M1s, that's the line. Right.
Well, I think there's also like them making the chip available for repair, and them just making the chip available, because they don't want that chip appearing in like Adele or something like that.
Right.
That's Adele, not Adele. That would be weird. But that being said, is like they don't want that chip being so. But the other piece of this is does there need to be a level of expertise before you're bequeathed upon to buy this thing. And let's use this as a car example. Like phone, there's very little danger, I would say, in me working on my phone. Worst case, I brick it. Me working on a Tesla, on the other hand, like there's now auto driving functionality and things like that. If I make the tire, I don't know, again, I am not an auto engineer, anything like that, and I do not claim to know anything about it. But if I replace my tires and they say, nope, you're not even allowed to replace your tires on your Tesla, and I go and I replace the tires with a little bit bigger of a tire, and all of a sudden now the AI technology is going, okay, if I do this many rotations, I'm going this speed, but because I replaced a bigger tire, I'm now moving faster than it thinks I am, and I get into an accident and things like that. Like, is there restrictions that need to be placed? Maybe not to the point of like John Deere, but like, is Tesla, like that feels weird. Like, is it a safety concern for repair? Like, do you need to be bequeathed upon in order to be like, get the banner to say you're allowed to repair this thing, or should anyone be able to do it in their own house?
So there's so many things wrong with that.
Yeah.
Taking apart your phone, you've obviously never set yourself on fire by puncturing a battery before. Taking apart your car, I would argue there's no difference between taking apart a Tesla and taking apart a gas engine. I can actually go through and you can add superchargers, you can do all kinds of things to your gas engine, your combustion engine, that will cause it to combust at bad times and cause major accidents. And it happens all the time. I've done retreading of tires before. I've taken apart tires, shaved them down, and then melted rubber back onto them to make my own tires. Was it dangerous? No, because I actually knew what I was doing. But if someone else were to do it that didn't know,
what about if you don't?
Yes.
What about if you don't know what you're doing? Like, that's the thing.
Exactly.
Like, I feels like there's a fundamentally difference though between you're saying, oh, a car and a Tesla are the same. No, like just like an old phone, which was easy to repair, like that was much easier to repair versus a much more sophisticated one. Like, I do think those are fundamentally different. Gowrie, let me throw it to you.
Let me ask this question. Are you saying we should make it illegal for the average consumer to open their phone?
No, absolutely not.
Well, then what's the difference? Like, what's the difference? Like, you have the ability to open it. You have the ability to play with these things. Manufacturers being concerned about the safety of their consumers is nonsensical. We do unsafe things all the freaking time, right? You could go downstairs and break open the front of your and play with your microwave and remove the safety netting and microwave yourself by accident right now. Like, this is not a real concern.
And I would agree with. I'm gonna look at chat. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't case law dictate that how components are organized, schematics are protectable IP? Didn't Robert Kearns and I actually someone else can field this question. The where I was saying is like we do dangerous things all the time, and I think you hit an interesting point. Is at what point is it the manufacturer's right, and probably right is probably a strong word, to govern the protection of people buying their products? Like if I buy a knife from a kitchen restaurant, from a I don't know, Bed Bath & Beyond. Where do you buy knives now? I buy them online. But like if I buy a new cooking knife and I cut a finger off, that's not on them. That's on me. And at the same time, is that same logic being used for this?
Dude, perfect example. This would be like a knife manufacturer that sells intricate knives with specialty handles for like $300 each. And then you go to them and say, I need a replacement handle because mine broke. It was made out of wood and maybe the wood snapped or whatever. And that knife manufacturer coming back and say, yeah, we can't sell you that due to safety concerns. You might cut yourself. And you're like, that is exactly what this is, right? It is an absurd argument that is just purely anti-consumer and designed to make them money. The end.
It's a litigious society. Everyone has to cover their own ass now because I disassembled my knife. I took apart my microwave and I removed the safety netting in there, and I made soup or jello or something in there, and now I have cancer. And I now try to sue that company, and so they slap a warning label on the side of it that says do not remove safety netting. People get sued all the time, and my arguments towards those is if you take it apart, it should be known that whatever happens is your fault. If you disassemble it and you break it somehow and it's now dangerous, it is now your fault, not the manufacturer's fault, because you have now altered it. Now, that's not arguing against right to repair. That's arguing against the manufacturer being held liable for stupid people taking things apart. Now, I will take anything apart. You hand me something and you're like, hey, I want you to figure out how this works. I will take it apart. I have a very wide skill set that allows me to take things, random things apart, and I'll figure out how it works. I may get it wrong. I may get it right. It may be dangerous. It may be safe.
Never run again.
Most likely it will never run again. There's some things I can't reassemble, but it comes back to the skill set. If you're worried about how dangerous it is and you don't have the skill set, go learn. If you have the skill set, then you should be able to take it apart. You should be able to repair it.
Right. I think it's interesting you said that. Are people able to self-govern to know whether or not they should be fixed? And the question is it anyone's job to actually enforce that? And I think that's what Gator's about to talk about does within manufacturers, this is where I was driving at, does the manufacturer have the right to declare, like, no, you're not allowed to do this? Like, I feel like there's that knee-jerk reaction. It's like, I am a free citizen. I can do whatever I want. It's mine. I bought it with my hard-earned cash. Like, is that what we're driving at? Is that what right to repair really is?
It's having access to parts and being able to go. So we're all hackers here. We've talked about how we typically go through, we'll grab something and we'll repurpose it for some other use case. When we're talking about the right to repair, we're not even talking about that. We're talking about being able to bring something back up to a working order. To your point about saying who's going to say how hard something is or isn't to repair, that's one of the reasons why I love like the iFixit folks, to where they have teardowns and they have on each one of their sites and their guides for repairing things a level of difficulty, how much time it's going to take, and what tooling you need up front. When I'm looking at trying to repair my car, I look at, okay, I am not a mechanical engineer. Is this a job that I can do, that I want to learn how to do this? What tools do I need? What skill set do I need? And how much time is this going to take? Versus if I can go take this into a shop, I've got an older car. Can I actually get those parts anymore, OEM or third party? And with so much of what we've been talking about, like with the car modifications that have been going on for a very, very long time, where is that enabled in electronics? And right now, that's not the case. To where if you try to get a replacement screen, they're now specifically like the newer phones, they are locking it to where the Touch ID doesn't work, or you have to repair the IDs of the screen with the actual motherboard. And it gets to the point where even if you can get the parts now, they're actively blocking you replacing things. And that's the part that really starts to bug me.
This is an interesting point, though. I was going to say, and then I'll open it back up. Is like, I remember when I modded my my Wii, like the Nintendo Wii, and I wanted to be able to do things and run a browser and all the different operating systems on it. I didn't use it for pirated games, Gulo. I would never ever do anything like that.
Part of the homebrew community.
Part of the homebrew community. But like, I remember the weirdest thing I had to actually purchase, because you could like kind of make them themselves, was a screwdriver. It was a 3-pronged screwdriver. You couldn't do a flathead. You couldn't do a Phillips head. You had to do this weird 3-pronged thing. So question with right to repair, say like, okay, all the chips are available and they publish the schematics. Like, this would also require them not having these weird physical deterrents. Like, I almost wonder, like, for something like the old blue boxes where there would be like physical security in them, where like when you ripped them open, it would rip chips and rip traces, so it stopped working.
So So with the screwdrivers, people call them security screws. There's actually reasons for those types of screws. Like when you have an automated production facility, you can end up having too much torque on a Phillips head. And having a 3-pronged allows for a less chance of stripping a screw. They may be security screws in the sense that the average consumer doesn't have a tri-wing screwdriver, but it's not like tri-wing screwdrivers are unavailable, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not really quote unquote anti-consumer security screws. They're actually because of real tolerances and real reasons. Now, like, it's probably some combination of the two reasons, but also there's an actual reason to use a tri-wing versus like a Phillips head.
Okay.
So I agree with that as well. There's certain things where, yeah, you could use a security screw because you don't want security screw. So because you don't want somebody to take something apart in that way, and so you have a special device. But there are engineering tolerances to that. I once again going back, I used to take apart CRT monitors and CRT TVs. There's a flyback in there. No one taught me about flybacks when they taught me about taking apart a TV. And the first time I melted a screwdriver to a TV, I'm like, ooh, that's cool. How do I actually do this without killing myself? Because there's so much energy that's stored in there that it literally would have killed me. And then learning about the process for doing that. And it's a process. It's a learning environment. Well, it wasn't a learning environment. It was a dangerous environment that I learned because my life depended upon it. And I learned those skill sets. The same thing for fixing a car, the same thing for fixing a tractor, possibly the same thing for fixing a phone. If you wear really tight jeans and you accidentally puncture the battery and it swells and you can't get it out of your pocket, so you're having to strip in a mall, but your jeans are too tight and it's burning you, that's a problem.
I read comments at the wrong time because all I heard, I was reading Praxia's comment that I wanted to comment on, and I zoned out for a second, and I came back in with Gulo saying, and if you have tight jeans and it's burning, that's a problem. You find yourself with tight jeans and it's burning, you should go see a doctor or self-repair.
So, did you have a comment that you wanted to comment on? I had one that I wanted to pull back up from earlier.
Yeah, it was Brandon Praxis. We started talking about explicit security screws, and then Brandon brought up one-way screws, and I feel like those are always evil. There's never a case for those, and maybe there is. Except
a single case.
What's
bathroom
the single
stalls. Case? Bathroom stalls are the single case that you want a one-way screw.
I think the goal, though, is a one-way screw, and then make sure the gap is at least 1 inch wide. Like that, those doors won't shut unless there's at least 1 inch there. Just make either way. Go on, Connery, pull us on back.
So I wanted to bring up Taylor S said something earlier. He goes, "Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the current case log dictate how components are organized, i.e., schematics, as protectable IP? Didn't Robert Kearns wipe the floor with Ford over this?" And so people aren't aware. I had to look up Robert Kearns and his Ford thing. So Robert Kearns invented the modern windshield wipers, and all of the main manufacturers of cars were like, no thanks, we don't want to pay you. And then they quietly put windshield wipers on all their cars, and he took them to town for like hundreds of millions of dollars. Like he got a proper good settlement because they all claimed it wasn't novel enough to be protectable IP. And the U.S. Patent Office disagreed. And so the question there is it protectable IP? I want to make something very clear. It's not that I think that schematics are not protectable IP, right? What I think is the protectable IP in this relationship is utilizing the schematics to produce a board that does it. Whether or not, so you could take the schematics, rearrange them, but functionally have all of the traces go to the exact same spot and do, or like similar enough. You could do that, and it would still be considered a protected IP because the production of the board is what is the intellectual property, not the schematic itself. The schematic itself has copyright to it, but this is what it comes down to: is the people who actually print the boards and do the pick and place and actually produce the chips that are going to, or not just the chips, but actually produce the chipsets that go into your devices. If they have access to the schematics, obviously, they have the ability to do a comparison between a BOM of all of these BOM
bill of materials.
They have the access to be able to do a comparison between some random board that comes in and the Apple M1 chip iPhone or whatever. They have the ability to compare these two things and say, no, this random board that just came in is an iPhone knockoff. We're not going to produce it because they would be in violation of producing Apple's IP. Like, there is still controls there. Just publishing these schematics is not the same as allowing anyone to produce those boards. You could do it. It would be incredibly difficult as long as the IP rights are strong enough to say that board production facilities have to do this same thing. This is why, for example, and I'll use this as a perfect example. If you go to a professional photographer and you don't pay for reproduction rights, like you can usually have multiple different agreements. You can have a photographer take all your pictures, and they'll put a little stamp in the bottom left corner, bottom right corner that says XYZ's name photography. And you can buy prints from them, or you can buy the copyrights to those pictures from them. And it's usually a little bit higher price, but then you have the ability to go anywhere and reproduce them. If you take a print that has somebody's, a photography copyright in the bottom left corner to some print shop to have high quality things made, they won't do it. A lot of them won't do it because they'll be like, I don't think you have the copyright to this, so I'm not going to print this. It should be the exact same thing. They're like, this is a nice schematic you have here. It looks a lot like the Apple iPhone. I'm not going to print it for you unless you can show me it's not.
And there's whole realms of intellectual property is a fascination to me. So, like, one of the things we do, like at my company, for instance, we produce information security policies oftentimes. And those, Gulo, you look like you're going to jump out. Do you need to respond right now, or can I?
Yes.
I'm just going to finish my point.
I got something because this has existed forever, and I can't believe we haven't talked about this. We've got the freaking copyright, the copyright office, the patent office. You can look up schematics for a bunch of things unless companies like pay to have it blocked. Yes, I know there's some ambiguities in there, but like back in the day, like I used to have, one of the companies I used to work for had the complete instructions for an Atari controller. They had the entire schematics that were on wall posters that they hung in the bathrooms. It was fascinating to look at and actually watch. And those were things that came from like the copyright and patent offices. Now they have become more and more generic and they're removing a lot of those things. But back in the day, you could look at a lot of those things and be like, hey, I know how this works because this is the design they submitted.
Yeah, but like this goes back to like what was actually it dovetails really well in what I was saying is like a lot of those patents and whatnot are conceptual patents or design patents or like any number of patents that don't actually revolve around, we'll say like, let's use the M1 chip. Bad example because I actually don't know what their patent looks like for that. But like their patent might look something like, our idea is that we put all these chips onto one board so that they can function better, blah, 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 blah. It's not going to be, here's the schematic for our entire chip. It's the concept of putting all of these in one chip.
Technology patents are, and this is why, like, I don't want to turn this into a giant IP fight, but like, technology patents in the hardware and software realm are both incredibly vague and somehow weirdly both really, really difficult to actually violate and also really, really easy to be accused of violating.
Yeah. And like, I mean,
they're that bad.
There's general like encryption ones. It was funny. There was a project I worked on, years ago, and the patent they were trying to file, they actually called us for patent infringement because they tried to claim they owned SSL. And if I went and looked at their original patent, and it's actually pretty close to describing SSL. And it was just ridiculous. And the funny part is it was like this weird, vague, like lawyer report with like pictures of IDA Pro, like highlighting like encryption and stuff. It was like so weird and vague. There was like a weird Twitter post on the similar thing where they're like, what? How do you respond to like someone who's making an outlandish statement? I just get really angry and send pictures of IDA Pro with the word security scrolled across it.
I just wanted to add one thing, and it's just like this is not me talking from ignorance. I've actually filed like 4 or 5 patents now, and I have 2 patents that have been assigned to my name. So, and I know what's in mine, and I know how difficult it would be to violate it while also being able to reproduce the same functional thing. So, like, my personal opinion is like, I don't believe in software patents. I don't think an algorithm can be patented.
I actually think like maybe, but it would be incredibly hard because it would have to be like, again, it would have to go to a specific use. You can't just like patent the algorithm. You would have to say using this algorithm for this use. The thing I was going to mention with the schematics and whatnot, I think when they go, oh, well, when you open up the schematic, and this is where I was right before Gulo jumped in, when you open up the schematic, it means anyone can use it. And this is like one of the fascinations for me, because like one of the things we produce at our company is information security policies. And when we give those to clients, it's really weird. Oftentimes, we're not giving, like when we deliver, here is your policy set. We're not saying, here is the policy set, you own it. We're giving them a license to use that however they want, as long as it's only for internal use. So they can't grab our entire policy set, turn them into templates, and start reselling them, because there's IP in there that we're looking to protect. So we had an IP lawyer who wrote up the entire verbiage for it, which says, we're giving you, a worldwide royalty-free, blah, 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 all of this stuff. We're giving you that license to be able to use this only for internal use. And the same thing could be done with any of the schematics. These companies have lawyers who can easily say, this schematic is only to be used to repair your own device. And most of them often offer this and say, we're offering this. You're not allowed to reproduce, re-engineer, reverse engineer, blah, 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 blah. So like that already kind of exists. It's just them becoming available. We're getting to the top of the hour though. So I want to kind of like pull this and talk about like where are we now? Where do we go next? Because there was a massive executive order Biden kind of pushed into play. And this is like one of the things I love about his channel. He started talking about, he's like, I don't care who it is. He goes, Trump, Biden, it doesn't care who you are, where you sit on the political scale. If it falls in line with right to repair and pushing that forward, I'm all for it. Biden passed an executive order which effectively said, right to repair, go forth and do. Now, that doesn't necessarily like mean, it's a big step forward, because he now has said, go forth and do. But where are we right now with it?
So
no
are we
one
talking about
cared what he said.
What was that? Go on.
Go ahead. Go on.
No one cared. Corporations didn't care what he said.
No, that's a lie. They absolutely did, because Apple, what has been against right to repair forever, all of a sudden started embracing it, because I think they do know what's coming. Like, I think they know there's a push there. And that one I can't speak to fully, because he did it. You know what? I will link his video down below, because it was a solid video. But there was a big turn from Apple starting to push forward right to repair.
Yeah, let me just, like, for anyone who doesn't know what the actual order says, I'm reading a headline here, so I'm paraphrasing, but Biden signed a sweeping executive order directing multiple federal agencies to promote additional competition in the U.S. economy. One such directive encourages the FTC to enact additional regulations that prohibit manufacturer policies barring the repair of equipment and devices by individuals and independent repair shops, which... that sounds a lot like that's not quite the same as forcing the manufacturers to publish their schematics and sell their components, but it may, but it's probably the first step, right? Because he's directing, if the FTC actually creates regulations that start us down that route, and it sounds like Apple and others are already starting, what they're doing is, like what's happening, assuming Apple and Samsung and others are starting to build or new policies around this, is they're trying to front run the regulations, where they're saying like, no, we're good citizens and we're doing it, so you really don't have to regulate us that hard, please, thank you. Like that's what's happening.
Well, and it's a PR thing too. They can easily get the credit for it too. And I think what I'll be interested in is this is probably a topic we touched on earlier. I'll hand it to Gator, but we touched on earlier was like reducing e-waste and things like that, which I find so intriguing on this topic. Gator?
Absolutely. So what can we do now, and where are we at now? I would say I'll redrop a link to the iFixit manifesto for folks, because I have constantly have these posters up in our hackerspace, because when people are getting interested in jumping in and learning more, get yourself a guide, get yourself an old device or your current device and see if it's repairable. And then I like to vote with my wallet when it comes to new devices that are coming out that support that. The Steam Deck is completely brand new to the market, and it's also repairable. You can go get the iFixit parts, including the stupid joystick drift. That's one of the biggest issue when we're talking about like with the Nintendo Switches, to where you have the Joy-Con drifts, and your only way right now to repair that on a Nintendo is buying new Joy-Cons, and those are $70 if you get the official brand. These are literally, you take out a handful of screws on the back of this guy, and then you're able to replace just the joystick and the board. This is not a thin device, but it's not a thick device like your and my old laptops are either. So new manufacturers are planning with be able to make sure that things are repairable in the future. And I'm loving that. And I want to continue to throw money at folks that can do that so I can repair my products, man.
And
not, bought by corporations.
Not a sponsored. Oh, nice. We were rated. Thank you so much for joining Hacker Hangouts. If you want to come back, we do this every Saturday morning. Today we're talking about right to repair. Also, kind of a fun announcement. I was bullied in. We can all blame Gowrie. It's all his fault. Him right there. It's your fault. He forced me to start a Discord channel. It is now up. The server is available. We'll drop a link both in this video below, and then I don't know, I'll link one if someone throws one in chat. I'll throw it up on screen. But feel free to join. We're going to talk about, come up with new topics. Usually I float our goofy thumbnails that we come up with to get feedback, or if you have ideas for topics. So please feel free. Not a sponsor. By the way, Brandon, well, since you're on here, thank you. He gave us our first sponsor, not an actual sponsor, but Garbage VPN. If you see any ads for this video, I'm sorry, but we are a proud sponsor, not a sponsor, of Garbage VPN. Garbage in and garbage out will continue to happen on every VPN, and we are here to support that with Garbage VPN. His ads have been amazing.
He even bought garbagevpn.com and redirected it to our YouTube channel, so super appreciate that. Very hilarious, and I love it.
Oh,
Garbage VPN. Do you want to spend money for no value? Then sign up for Garbage VPN.
Oh, that's incredible. With that, though, I think there's a few last topics we have, which is when it comes to right to repair, one of, I think, the biggest benefits of it is just like what Gator said, is the e-waste. Is one of the coolest things I've seen from Rossman's channel is him pouring in so, like, he gets really passionate about right to repair, but he pours so much time and here's how you can get like a 90K job working on repair, being a repairman for any one of these technologies. And he puts so much time and effort into it. So I really love his channel. But one of the things he talks about is e-waste. Instead of like having a Tesla battery go bad and throwing out the entire battery to replace, or buying an entire Joy-Con, one of the things right to repair does is it actually like moves us forward into this idea of fixing things. I think the pendulum has gone back and forth quite a bit from old days, repair everything yourself, to things got so cheap right now, it's cheaper to throw away the refrigerator and buy a whole new refrigerator. Heck, that even for computers oftentimes, it's almost feels that way. But I feel like the pendulum has now shifted back and companies are now kind of getting to that point where they're forced to help. What's kind of the closing thoughts to kind of bring it to fruition?
So I would say that it's inevitable. Right. And the reason why I would say, and I'll close this up and then we can go through our closeouts. I think this is inevitable. And the reason why I think this is ultimately an inevitable force that's going to happen is because of what Microsoft did with the newer Xboxes. Right. Microsoft said, we're having this huge piracy problem, and people are going to crack into the Xbox IP and be able to run ROMs and all of those things eventually. But there's this whole group of people that don't actually care about doing that. And the only thing they care about doing is being able to run a homebrew on their Xbox. So why don't we make a sandbox within the Xbox that lets them install Linux and do whatever they want? And the only thing they don't get access to is some critical components that let you run a video game. And they let you switch between that mode, the sandbox mode, and the other mode. And so you can have your cake and eat it too. You can run all the homebrew you want. To some extent, you can actually utilize most of the hardware, things like that. And is it perfect? No, I don't think it's perfect. But what it does is it actually removes a lot of the homebrew people from the same market that the modders and the pirators are occupying, because they're enabled to do what they want. So why would they help people that are just making it harder for everyone else to do the homebrew stuff? And I think companies are going to realize that, quote unquote, this is the way, right? Mm-hmm. Enable people to utilize their hardware, and modify their software and do these things as much as possible while also protecting your IP. And if they can build that into their business model, then they're going to win out in the long run.
I think I want to expand on that because I think open source fits into this. I think somewhat loosely in some ways and somewhat more in others, which is some of the arguments that I've seen, again, in the Congress that he's replayed and that often are talked about is, oh, well, if you open the schematic, and again, schematic is not source code, but I'm going to use them not interchangeably, but independently right now. If you open that up, that's how viruses come across. And then if you open source a piece of software, that's how viruses and cyber attacks happen. And like, not only is there misnomers, and I know, like, oh my gosh, every person who has ever worked on the Linux kernel was like ripping their hair out, being like, are you kidding me? That's not how it works. But I do want to pull it back to cybersecurity. Like, is there cybersecurity concerns when you open schematics, when they release these chips to anywhere else? Like, is there a discussion here?
No, that's just blatant ignorance, right? It's like, I feel like the thing I would say is, and what we're really talking about, there was this hearing in the Maryland Assembly, and an assemblyman was, I have to assume, repeating some talking points that some lobbyists gave him about opening schematics leading to security issues and viruses, literally talking about viruses and software security issues in the context of hardware design. And those lobbyists made a fool of that assemblyman. And so, like, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he's actually just ignorant of what he's talking about. And I feel bad for how stupid whoever he's listening to made him look, because he looked really stupid. And I was like embarrassed to be from Maryland listening to that guy.
Yeah, it was definitely awkward. What was even more awkward was like his response later on, like years later, when it came to like voting on right to repair. He's like, because he called me a name, I am not going to vote for this. And it was like so weird. Like, that one was never have I lost more faith when watching something like that, where it's like, he called me a dirty name. In that case, I'm going to go against this thing.
I think this is a complicated enough topic. We're going to have to do some more streams on this and be more focused on individual talking points, because there's so much here to unpack. And you know, like, we're coming at this from the hacker perspective. Like, this is the weird thing to us. Right to repair to us is just reality, because we're gonna fucking do it. Like, no one's gonna stop me from taking apart my own stuff. No matter what the EULA says, I don't care. I'm going to rip things apart. That is a base reality for everyone here. I don't think the average consumer is that way, but I think the average consumer is getting there, right? Like,
especially
information on how to do this has never been more accessible, and more people are learning to pick these things up. And, you know, I would say that the OG hackers of the world are honestly farmers. Like, they have figured out how to do these things well before everyone else as a part of necessity. Like, these people have been hacking their John Deere tractors before right to repair even became like a talking point at all. And so, like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, for us, it's weird for us to hear, at least for me, it's weird for me to hear like, oh, right to repair is a thing. I didn't know about this. I just assumed everyone could just open their electronics and do whatever the heck they wanted. And then I started reading EULAs and realizing, like, yo, this is messed up.
Yeah. I love when there's always the company, like, I think it was like Blizzard or World of Warcraft. They're like, you donate part of your soul to me. And they like threw it in the EULA for a little bit. And they're like, this is actually BS. But like, it was so funny where they sneak it in. No one actually reads them. And then you read them and you're like, this is utterly ridiculous. I think with that, there's probably a good round to have. If anyone has, by the way, since we're streaming both to YouTube and Twitch, on YouTube, we have our past videos as well. If you're on Twitch, while we're closing up here, if you have someone that we should be rating, please drop it in chat, because it's always interesting to see new other people when the stream closes up. Thank you for watching, but let's close it on up. What do you got for us, Gator?
So in my use case, I'm going to say, vote with your wallet. Go after and pay for devices that allow you to repair your stuff. So sometimes it's going to cost you a little bit more. Sometimes it may cost you a little bit less. But that's a way for us to be able to not only learn how something works, we can repair it, and we can be responsible with the electronics that we have. So I see this all as positives, and make sure to also go love your hacker family.
Gower, what do you got for us?
Don't just vote with your wallet. Also vote. Vote often, vote early. Vote early, vote often. Yeah. Go.
Gula?
If you take apart your cell phone, do not wear tight jeans to put your cell phone back in.
With that, thank you for joining us on Saturday. I hope to see you on Discord. Give us a topic for next week if you have something you want us to talk about. Otherwise, we'll come up with a title, we'll come up with a thumbnail, and I will make it as ridiculous as always. Thank you for watching, and hack on.